Thank you so much, Ricky, and thanks to all of you for taking some time to join us today. I've been doing a lot of these town halls in person, virtually, by phone, and trying to find different ways and times of the day that we can best reach all of you. So hopefully this works for folks able to take a little time on their lunch break to tune in and hear about what's happening, or rather not happening in Washington. We are now in week 4 of the government shutdown, and that is the topic of this town hall. I'm here to listen about how this is impacting families in West Michigan, to tell you what I'm hearing, to report back about what I see in Washington, and also give some insights on how I think that we can get out of this mess. Though the government is shut down, I can assure you I and my team are hard at work. I have been in Washington every single week, and spending my time back here in the district. This morning, I visited a local hospital to talk about the healthcare cuts that we are seeing, how it's going to impact them and the patients they served, and then that they serve, and then spent the rest of the morning doing a roundtable with federal workers over at the airport, our frontline defenders of public safety, traveler safety, who are continuing to work diligently, even without a paycheck right now at this critical time. So let's dig right in. I want to start with how we got here. There is a lot of finger pointing in Washington right now, and a lot of political gamesmanship. That does not help anyone. This shutdown has real consequences. I sat and listened to federal workers who were trying to figure out how to make do without a paycheck this morning. I myself was a young attorney at the Department of Justice over a decade ago in the 2013 shutdown, when my student loans were kicking in, paying for daycare for 2 kids, and the government shut down and I was not getting a paycheck. It has real consequences. We have a responsibility as a Congress to pass a budget every single September by September 30th. It is our constitutional obligation. That date is set. It shouldn't surprise anyone. I frankly don't think that we should be sent home for August recess until we have at least the 4 corners of a budget agreement set and we know that we can meet that deadline. Anybody who balances a budget in their household knows there's not exactly a wiggle room if you just feel like, well, I didn't balance my budget on time. Sorry, bank, I can't pay my mortgage. Sorry, grocery store, we can't pay for this food that we need to buy. It's a non-negotiable. We have to figure out a budget. It needs to be said, however, that I think that all parties, all entities, if you are in a position of power, you bear responsibility for making sure that happens. I include myself in that. However, it does need to be said that there is a single party in power right now. They won an election. The Republicans are in charge of the House, the Senate, and the presidency. Winning an election comes with great power, but also great responsibility. That is, that's not finger pointing. That is pointing out who is in charge in this moment, which is critical to figuring out how we get out of it. House Democrats have been in Washington for the last 3 weeks, while House Republicans, who are in charge, have been nowhere to be found. Since July, Republicans have only called 20 legislative days of business in Washington, D.C. How in the world are you going to get a budget passed if you're only working 20 days out of 4 months? We need to get back to the table to talk about this deal, how we're going to get the government reopened, and to hash out the 4 corners of a budget agreement. The House has not been in session since September 19, over a month. Republicans have canceled votes now for 3 weeks in a row while giving themselves a vacation, funded by the taxpayers, by the way. They still get paid during this government shutdown. They're just simply not showing up to work. I met with federal workers this morning who continue to show up for their very long, taxing shifts, and they don't get paid. Our House leadership is continuing to cancel votes while still collecting a paycheck. This is unconscionable, and it bears calling out. I want to talk about how this is affecting the work that we do. My team can put out to everyone in written format after this town hall what is being impacted during this shutdown. I was talking with somebody at the grocery store last week, and they were like, "I don't even notice the government shut down. Like, why are we supposed to care about this?" And I said, well, part of the reason is federal workers are still continuing to work, even though they're not receiving a paycheck. But if this goes on too long, you will continue to see attrition. Additionally, anyone is going to grow a little bit discontent over the course of a period of time when they're not getting paid. We don't want our military growing discontent. We don't want our federal workers growing discontent who keep us safe while we're flying, our air traffic controllers, our TSA agents, our food inspectors, people who make sure that there's not invasive species coming into the Great Lakes. These are the individuals that we need in place. So it may take a while, right, if the government is shut down to really feel that effect, because we have conscientious civil servants who are still there doing their jobs. But those still remain to be the types of agencies that are not receiving the funding that they need. If you are impacted in any way by the federal shutdown, and we are going to have some time for Q&A where we're happy to take some questions, but I also want to just remind everyone that the work that we do is not just votes and bills and legislation in Washington. It's constituent services here on the ground. If you have any interaction with a federal agency, either individually or a loved one or an agency that you work for, we can help interface with that federal agency, Social Security, IRS. Our office is here to help. I want to talk through a minute about why we are in this fight as well. What is at the heart of this issue? This fight is about the affordability crisis in America that is crippling the American dream. When September 30th rolled around and we still didn't have a budget deal, Republican leadership in the House gave us what they called a clean continuing resolution, a clean CR. What that means on its face is that, in theory, this was a bill that just continued to fund the federal government at its current levels while we still figured out a budget deal. However, and the reason I voted no is that this was not a clean CR. It cuts nearly $13 billion with a B in non-defense discretionary spending. That includes an additional $280 million in NIH cuts, money that funds research on rare diseases, including those that impact children, pediatric cancer research. I dare my Republican colleagues who passed this clean CR to go to a family in West Michigan dealing with a rare disease and say, sorry, we can't fund the life-saving research to save your child. It was a clean CR. It's not a clean CR. We see it for what it is, and we're standing up. Additionally, President Trump and the Republicans in Congress have created an unprecedented healthcare crisis in this country. Not only through the Medicaid and relatedly Medicare cuts that came through the quote unquote one big beautiful bill earlier this year, but additionally by refusing to work with us and come up with a plan for a more affordable healthcare solution once tax credits on the Affordable Care Act are set to sunset at the end of this year. Subsidies that make insurance affordable to millions of Americans. You might have heard about it, the enhanced premium tax credits. They are set to expire at the end of this year. Without an affordable alternative in place, millions of Americans are going to face drastically increased health insurance premiums. This year, more than half a million people in Michigan enrolled in the ACA will be impacted, and nearly 90% of those people qualify for the subsidies that are set to expire. If the premiums expire, subsidies could increase by upwards of 75% on average. In Michigan, this means that people will be paying somewhere towards $400 a month more. And, that has a variance. Some people might be paying less, but there's actually a lot of people that could be paying way more than that. It's just unacceptable. When, I was with healthcare providers at a local hospital today, they were talking to me, and saying, thank you. Thank you for fighting for this fight. We know what this is going to mean for our patients. Just because people don't have insurance doesn't mean they don't get sick, right? And when individuals are faced with those skyrocketing premiums, they will have to make a choice. And many of them will choose not to get health insurance, but that doesn't mean they won't get sick. They'll still go to the doctor. And in fact, they'll go there when, they're more sick than if they had insurance. It's going to be more expensive to treat them. And the only way for the hospital to absorb those costs is to pass it on to other consumers. So even if you're listening and you don't get coverage on the Affordable Care Act, you're thinking, this isn't my fight. It is your fight because it impacts everyone when we don't have a fully insured population pool. At its core, this fight is about affordability. Healthcare is already too expensive, and so is everything else. We're facing a true cost of living crisis, and Americans simply can't afford the things that they need anymore, and healthcare is a leading cause. It is not about whether we as a nation can afford this. We have already seen that this presidency and this Republican-controlled Congress are willing to give away major tax credits to the ultra-wealthy. Here we're talking about tax credits to middle and working class families to afford their health insurance. Earlier this summer, Republicans called us back in from the 4th of July holiday to vote on this one big, beautiful bill, a package that gave tax credits to the upper class, including the 0.1% to the tune of $700 a day. We're asking for Michiganders $400 a month, and they're giving away tax benefits at $700 a day to the 0.1% just because. This is not about whether we can afford it. It's about what do we prioritize in this country. Additionally, President Trump has recently announced that he's prepared to give away $40 billion in aid to Argentinian farmers. That's 2 years of ACA subsidies, even funded at the current levels. He's putting foreign farmers above American farmers and before American healthcare. It's unacceptable. This is why we are standing up and fighting in this moment. Make no mistake, Republicans could end this government shutdown today by working with me and other congressional Democrats to extend these ACA tax credits, something that over 78% of the American people want us to do. I am here at the table, ready to get to work so that we can address this affordability crisis and reopen the government. Some of the most basic functions are on pause. I've mentioned just a few of them, but it's also worth noting the Department of Housing and Urban Development has stopped reviews of all housing discrimination complaints. The VA has paused programs that help our veterans transition back into civilian life. Social Security is still issuing their disability payments, but the benefit verification system has been paused. Tens of thousands of federal workers are not getting paid, and this hurts real people, including right here in West Michigan. Government shutdowns are also bad for the economy. The last 3 government shutdowns cost the taxpayers nearly $4 billion. It's just an irresponsible way to govern. The president is taking this opportunity to create even more chaos by firing more federal workers who are on the job. Republicans at this time control both chambers of Congress and the White House. They got us into this mess. They can get us out. It bears repeating at every possible turn. I hear them loving to blame Democrats for being in this situation. I wish we had as much power as they think we do. But congratulations, they won an election. Now it's time to lead. Working people cannot afford this current situation. Our country can't afford it. Republicans have to come to the table and work with us for an affordable option on healthcare for the American people. Thank you so much for joining me here today. The most important thing is that I am here to take your questions. I am the only member of our West Michigan congressional delegation who is still doing town halls, both in person and virtually. I never forget for a single day who I work for, and that's every single one of you. Thank you for joining me here today. I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. The chat is lighting up. If anyone has a question, please feel free to put it in the chat box under you. First, we will go to Robin. Robin says, I am 61 soon and I planned my retirement years carefully and budgeted accordingly. The loss of my Affordable Care Act subsidy will force me to extinguish my savings. My $320 per month premium is estimated to increase to over $1,000 per month.
Robin, I hear you. And when people say things to me like, why can't you just, get along, go with what the Republicans want you to do. It is because of people like you in your situation that I say we cannot just turn our backs on the American people who are asking us to do something in this moment. The frustrating thing for so many people is that there's a lot of people in West Michigan who voted for this president because he promised to address the affordability crisis. And in fact, he's doing the exact opposite. These tariffs are crippling American families, adding, over $4,000 a year to the average family of four. I was in the grocery store last week and my 12-year-old was like, Mom, I want to get this box of cereal that he loves for his after school snack. And he was like, it's $7. And my heart just broke that he was paying attention to this and that's what he was focused on. But I was like, yeah, we're not getting that this week, buddy. I'm not paying $7 for a box of cereal. You could have a banana or an apple instead. But think about what that means. It is unaffordable. And these healthcare costs are going to make it just impossible for Americans to be able to afford coverage. And it's not, it's not even across the board. The people over 50 retirement age, individuals who are in their 50s and 60s who are not yet eligible, not can't afford, who are not yet eligible for Medicare, they face the largest increase in premiums right as you're getting ready to retire and you're on a fixed income, right? That is why we are out here fighting. If we fail to extend these tax credits in this moment, and let me just say this, I don't believe these tax credits are the long-term solution. We need to come back to the table and figure out a more comprehensive plan for health insurance in this country. But if we don't do this in this moment, we are failing the American people. We are failing to live up to our end of the bargain as legislators. So that's why we are standing up and we're fighting back.
Thank you, Congressman, and thank you, Robin. Up next, we have a question from Rolf. Will WIC and SNAP run out of money in November?
It's a great question. We're having a call. It's a little bit state by state, Ralph, or Rick, I'm sorry. And we are having a conversation with the governor's team as a congressional delegation for her to walk us through where the state is on this in their budget. So it is a state by state issue. But since since the shutdown started, and again, it's now entering its fourth week, it is a week by week situation on where where we're able to get the money that we need to pay for the things like SNAP, things like our farm insurance, and we are, we're making sure that we are working with the governor and her team and our state legislators to get as much money as we can so that we don't run out no, it was Rolf. I'm sorry. I was like, my team is like, it actually was Rolf. I think we have a question from Rick coming up soon. Sorry. They're passing me a note while I'm doing this. I did have it right. But it's up to us to work with the governor and the state's team to say, we are we want to stretch out this money as long as possible. But from the federal perspective, there does not appear to be enough money in SNAP's contingency fund. So from the federal fund to fund November benefits. So the USDA has started to tell states to hold their benefit issuance files for next month, a day before the shutdown began. Again, there's some things that the state might be able to do to cover that. But the White House announced a temporary infusion of funds to keep the program running, but we don't know how long that funding will last. We don't know the details around it. But we are, again, working in lockstep with the state every single step of the way to make sure that we have what we need in place. So thanks for that question, Rolf.
Thank you so much. Up next is a question from Lynn that I think we've received about 40 times now. Has Congress approved the $40 billion that Trump has given to Argentina? If not, what can you do to stop that?
Absolutely not. And if that came across our desk, we would say 100% no. We need that money for American families, for our American farmers, to pay SNAP for hungry families. It is unacceptable that the president thinks he can greenlight that money. Congress holds the power of the purse. And I want to say this. This is a fundamental of our Constitution. Our Republican colleagues love to talk about how they will uphold the Constitution, and yet they are failing it every single day. And it is not just a paper document that lives in the National Archives. It is a living document that protects your rights every single day. It is a muscle. And if we don't exercise it, it atrophies and it fails. The reason Congress holds the power of the purse is not just because Congress is so self-important, and members of Congress are so self-important, though I work with some colleagues who may think that. It is because we work for the American people. The House of Representatives is the only branch of government where the only way to serve is to be elected by the people. We work for you. I work for you. Because every day we're deciding how to spend your money, your tax dollars. People talk about government money, federal funding. Those are tax dollars. Those don't just appear out of nowhere. We don't just print them at the mint. It's federal money that comes from the American people. So we need to be incredibly conscious of the values that we are infusing into our spending programs. And the president of the United States alone cannot just greenlight a $40 billion bailout to Argentina when American farms are going under and American families are suffering.
Thank you. Up next, we have a question from Barbara. What is going to be the response if President Trump sends federal troops to Michigan?
Well, the key on this issue, Barbara, and thank you for asking, is cooperation, right? That is at the heart of all of this. If there are states that feel that their own public safety is at risk and they want the help of the federal government, they can coordinate with the federal government to send in the National Guard. But if a state does not consent, it is usurping that state's authority for the federal government to go in and then send in their own troops. What we are seeing, in places like Portland, in California, in Illinois, is unconstitutional and it's unprecedented. The last time this happened in American history was, when Johnson sent troops in to, deal with civil rights protests, and that was to protect citizens. Right now, we have Trump using the power of the federal government to send troops in and so to suppress citizens who are expressing their dissent. I think the governor has been very clear that she does not want federal troops to come to Michigan. This is a Governor Whitmer issue, but we would stand in lockstep with her and do everything in our power to stand up to the president if he were to send troops here against her wishes.
Thank you so much. Going to bring up the next question so that the congresswoman can correct the record on how you can get help if you need it. This comes in from Vincent and a few others. My wife and I read that the Social Security Administration's 800 number is out of commission.
Okay. We have received a couple calls on this and a couple concerns, and I can verify at least of 1:30 on Tuesday, August 21st, is that the 1-800 number is operational. It is currently up and running. If you have received an error message or you can't get through in some way, please call our office. We can put in a request on your behalf. We can interface for a direct case. And I want to give you two numbers. I'll give you what we have as the correct and operational number for Social Security, and then I'll give you our office number. And my team can put that in the chat too to make sure that everybody can see it. But first is the Social Security Administration's number, and that is 1-800-772 1213. 1-800-772-1213. That's Social Security. First line, try calling there, yourself. If you don't get through, please reach out to our office. It is our job to help you interact with a federal agency, and we are here to help with that. Our phone number is 616-451-8383. That's 616-451-8383. Thank you so much for that question.
All right. And the congresswoman always says that she'll take a tough question. We've gotten this one from a few people who asked, so are you saying that the Democrats are completely innocent in the shutdown and you should just blame the other side for this?
Thank you for that question. Let me be clear, absolutely not. Tim, I'm not sure if you were on during my opening remarks, but I would never cast blame without also taking some personal responsibility. I'm a member of Congress. I bear a responsibility for passing a responsible budget every year, just like everybody else. That's why I have joined, just about every solution-oriented, problem-solving budget working group in Congress that you can join so that we can come up with a long-term solution. The Problem Solvers Caucus, the Fix the Debt Commission, the Committee for a Responsible Budget, Third Way, No Labels. These are groups that, meet Republicans and Democrats to talk about how we get here. But to be clear, there is one party that is in control of all three branches of government. And I think it is really important for them to remember that, they bear the responsibility of convening, right? There's other work we can do in Washington, but for 3 weeks in a row now, the Republicans in charge have canceled those votes. They're, just at home and on vacation. We know for a fact, we have seen members of Congress leaving, going on vacation, golfing, still getting paid. I think that's unconscionable. We have a responsibility to pass a budget, and the Republicans, when you are in charge, when you have the honor of winning an election, you have the responsibility of convening and making sure the job is done. So, I do absolutely put the responsibility at the feet of the people who are in charge. I hope Democrats have the ability to be in that position at some point soon, right? And then we will also take the responsibility for saying, you know what? We got to find a way to get this budget passed. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. Up next, we have a question from Barb. My worry is that Republicans want to break the government so they have more power. Do you feel the real government, quote unquote, is dissolving?
Barb, I think that is a great question. I have a huge fear and concern right now that I am addressing by standing up and raising my hand to serve in this moment. That I see some of the foundations of our democracy eroding. I see my colleagues in Congress being afraid to stand up to this president, this administration, even when they know the things that he is doing is wrong. Like giving a $40 billion bailout to Argentina that did not come through the people of the United States of America, passing over tariffs to a unilateral executive when that is a power that belongs in Congress, allowing him to usurp the powers of the National Guard and Immigration and Customs Enforcement in unconstitutional ways. I see that as an unconstitutional power grab, and I fear for the ways in which my colleagues are, particularly those on the other side of the aisle, are not willing to stand up to their own president. I've stood up to the president of my party a number of times. It's gotten me in hot water. It's not easy. I know it, but doing what's right often isn't easy. But we can't forget, not for a single day, that we don't work for a single man, not even the president of the United States. We work for the American people, our constituents who sent us here to do this job. That being said, I also want to say that there are four branches of government: the executive, the legislative, the judicial, and the fourth branch is the American people. And I see the American people stronger now, more unified now than ever before. I see people standing up, protesting peacefully, using that hard fought First Amendment right to freedom of speech. I see people calling and engaging my office, people who agree or don't agree, joining this town hall right now, saying that we are here, we are with you, we're ready to hold you accountable, we're ready to cheer you on, any number of things. So I think that it is critical that we all remember that power, right? From my official office here, I am not going to presume to tell you who to vote for, but I can also tell you that our democracy is still intact. And if you're upset about what is happening, you have the ability, the right to vote for a different outcome. And I think that is a really powerful tool to remember in a democracy like ours. And so because that right is still strong, it's for that reason that, I don't think that our government is completely gone yet. I think that in many ways, this administration wants us to believe that, so that we'll just give up. But we're not going to give up that easily.
Up next, we have a question from Sandra. How is establishing a government budget similar or dissimilar to establishing a household budget?
In many ways, Sandra, I think it is incredibly similar. In fact, I think I struggle to see some of the differences, though there are some. I think when it comes to similarities, you have a set pot of money. And you need to allocate out what you are going to spend that on every single year. You have to plan, right, for your known expenses. You have to allocate for emergencies and unexpected needs. You need to balance different priorities and competing interests. And you need to do everything that you can to live within your means. I think there's a big difference with your household budget in that there's changing leadership and politics and priorities that go back and forth, sometimes on a 2-year basis, sometimes even mid-year, depending on if there's losses. So it can be very challenging to set a long-term budget trajectory. When my family and I set our long-term budget goals, it's like, okay, we all know that we want, to take this vacation in 5 years. We're going to plan for that. We got college for our kids. We got to, think about possibly adding a car when we get an additional car, when we get new drivers. Those are long-term priorities that are set, stable. We know we're going to work towards. But, we see a real shift in priorities from one administration to the next, right? Democrats have always fought for some version of healthcare that is subsidized by the taxpayer, right? Whether it is for the sick and vulnerable, whether it is through a plan like the, ACA, the Affordable Care Act. Republicans don't want that. They have tried over 70 times since the Affordable Care Act was passed into law, over 70 times to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And so when you're constantly, balancing those priorities for what was passed in the one big beautiful bill, so-called, it is you have the largest wealth shift from the middle class to the upper class in American history, right? So Republicans want to give major tax credits to the ultra wealthy in the assumption that it's just going to trickle down, although the wealth gap has increased, exponentially over the last 10 years. And we're not willing to fund priorities like our farmers or our healthcare, feeding the sick and the hungry. And they're just shifting priorities. So it can be hard to stay focused on, making sure those long-term priorities stay intact.
Up next, we have a question from James. How much of what you're talking about with the rise in healthcare costs is passed on to those who actually pay for their own healthcare and hospital costs? This data doesn't seem to get published by the media.
That's a good and interesting question. I think it's available in some different formats, and I can see if I can work with my team to find some reliable independent analysis about how that cost sharing goes out that we can include in one or two of the next newsletters. But healthcare is funded by a multitude of different sources, so that can be why it is hard to track. But it's funded by private insurers like Blue Cross Blue Shield, public programs like Medicare, Medicaid, private funds of, uninsured patients, often with devastating personal financial consequences, right? Individuals pay out of pocket. There's charity programs at our local hospitals that pick up some of the cost. But we know for a fact that our entire community pays more through higher premiums and higher tax rates when too much care goes uncompensated. And that is what I am worried about, the devastation to the entire healthcare system and what that means long term.
Thank you. Up next, we have a question from Lynn P. Will federal workers get back pay for the time the government is shut down?
Yes, they should, and we will make sure that they do. Under this current administration, nothing is certain, but let me guarantee you, in 2018, the House of Representatives passed a bill that says federal workers are guaranteed to back pay after a shutdown is ended. Now, the president has threatened to take that away, reversing, this longstanding policy. Indeed, a bill that was passed and signed into law, but he he has tried illegal things before. That's why I say they should. We may have to fight it out in the courts. But one thing is for sure, we are not taking his bluster that he's not going to pay these federal workers at face value. The American people spoke through their representatives in Congress when when we passed this into law, and we're going to make sure that the president abides by that law.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you, Congresswoman. Up next, we have received a lot of questions asking for your thoughts about the ongoing White House construction, as well as a lot of people whose tours were canceled over the past few months, including over the summer, for this ongoing construction.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows you where the priorities are of this president. At a time when our troops were potentially to go without pay. This was before the president said he was going to dip into this other discretionary fund. Okay, so even before that, at a time when our TSA workers were going without pay, our air traffic control workers were going without pay, the president of the United States convened some of the wealthiest individuals in the United States of America into his ballroom to talk about his expansion project and how he wanted them to raise him $200 million for a ballroom. Could anything be farther from the priorities of the American people? Not to mention, ongoing vanity construction projects at the White House have significantly interfered with individuals' abilities to tour, to see the White House. I know some families from West Michigan, a trip to DC is a lifetime trip. They only go once, right? And regardless of the president, they still want to see the White House, but their tours have been interrupted by these incredibly expensive construction projects that do not serve the interest of the American people.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Up next, we have a question from Jennifer that says, what can we, the people, do to help end the government shutdown, if anything?
Well, I mean, you're already doing it. We hear people engaging across the country, making your voice heard, reaching out to your member of Congress like you're doing right now, to express your concern, whether it is just give in to everything the Republicans want, we hear you, right? I have to take into consideration a lot of people's perspectives, right? And the vast majority of people that we are hearing from in our office are saying, please don't give up. Even if the shutdown has to go on a little longer, please don't give up fighting for our health care. But you can make your voice heard. And, we can put pressure on Republicans. You have the world at your fingertips, when it comes to social media or our regular media. Be willing to talk about how you think it's atrocious that, this Congress is continuing to fund a Republican leadership that is unwilling to put votes on the calendar and reopen this government.
Thank you. We have a question from Bruce, Kennedy, and many others asking how much you think the government shutdown is related to Republicans not wanting the Epstein files to be released.
I'm never going to try to predict or assume, another individual's motive, but it is clear from the fact that Republicans are refusing to return to Washington at this moment, refusing to hold regular business, even though they could put other votes on the floor, they could call us back to Washington, but they're refusing to do that at a time when they would have to swear in my colleague, Adalita Grijalva, who has won duly elected by her constituents, won an election, and needs to be sworn into Congress. She would be the 218th vote to try and to release the Epstein files, to sign a discharge petition that would require the release of the Epstein files. Simultaneously, we know that Republicans are pressuring other Republican members who have signed the discharge petition to try to remove their names and say, I don't want my name on there anymore, so that when Adelita signs her name, there still won't be 218. So they are working that pressure campaign while they are refusing to do the work of the American people, all for what? To try and protect a known sex offender, a pedophile. I mean, this is, it is unconscionable. It is un-American, and it needs to be called out. Republicans need to be held accountable for this. And, it's not only disenfranchising Adelita's voters in Arizona who deserve a representative. It's disenfranchising all of the American people who want to get back to work, and they are refusing to do it just over this one, this one vote, and the fact that they would have to release the Epstein files. I don't know about you, but it makes me wonder all the more what's in there.
Thank you. You're getting a lot of thanks in the chat for answering some of these tough questions, Congresswoman. Up next, we will go to our last question so that we can have time for closing remarks. Thank you to everyone for joining today. And as the Congressman said, we will include the office information. I know the chat is moving quickly, so we'll have the team include it one more time in a way to contact our office, as well as how to subscribe to the Congresswoman's weekly newsletter that she writes. The last question is from Ed P. The question is, I wonder if there are any congressional initiatives to address the Affordable Care Act and fix some or all of the deficiencies that you and Republicans are talking about.
Oh, absolutely. I can't even begin to tell you all of the ones that are out there, Ed. It is a great question. There are a number of healthcare working groups working on both short-term and long-term fixes. To go back to something else that I said earlier, you know, I want these tax credits extended so that in the immediate term, individuals whose premiums will rise by, 10, 20,000 dollars a year, won't have to face that burden and make that horrible choice between health insurance and, being able to put food on the table for their families. But we shouldn't be in this immediate crisis situation. I want a longer term solution that will address quality and affordability for healthcare for all Americans. And there are all options on the table. And there is a particularly exciting working group with all of the doctors in Congress who are convening national experts on this issue. And I've tapped into that a little bit so that we can weigh in with some healthcare perspectives from West Michigan as well. But, again, it's going to be about having a majority that wants to save affordable health care. So we want to be ready for a plan when Democrats are in charge again, and we can move forward. But yes, there absolutely is. And if there's a moment of hope that I can give to all of this, just terrible tearing down of healthcare that we're seeing, it's that I don't foresee a situation where we don't rebuild. The American people want affordable, quality healthcare. We have heard it time and time again, and I believe that we will have a majority probably very soon that is ready to address that need. And when we do, we're going to be ready to rebuild something even better in place of the Affordable Care Act and of Medicaid, which is an essential lifeline, but also is a deeply fraught program in and of itself and was not the most functional. So I think that, you have a lot of people like me included, who are really, really committed to this issue, and want to, not only save what's existing, but build something even better and stronger in its place. Thanks for the great question.
Thank you so much. Our team has dropped our information and ways to contact the Congresswoman and let her know your thoughts in the chat. And Congresswoman, I'll turn it over to you for any closing remarks. Thank you all for joining us.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. Well, thank you all so much for joining me here today. We had hundreds of people on over the course of this webinar, and I really want to thank you for your time and your attention. This is a perilous moment in American democracy, and I deeply believe the way that we get out of it is by having engaged and responsive representatives and engaged, curious constituents, right? You're doing your part today by showing up, asking tough questions, and I hope you continue to stay engaged. You can sign up for my newsletter to hear about all the things we're working on in Washington, and always reach out to my office with your questions and comments. Thanks again for joining us today. Take care.